Welcome to Syntax. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Front End Happy Hour podcast.
Welcome to this week's JS Party.
Live from Shipshape Studios, this is Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot, with your hosts, Robbie the Wagner and me, Charles William Carpenter III.
That's right, Charles. We drink whiskey and talk about web development. I mean, it's all in the name. It's not that deep.
This is Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot. Do not adjust your set.
Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot is brought to you by...
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Men Growing Beards. We have one of the most senior members of the Men Growing Beards community here today with us. We have Jason. What's going on, Jason?
Just, over here eating
Growing
healthy
beards.
for a healthy coat shine.
Nice. I'm a junior in the Growing Beards community, but I'm excited to be here and learn from the masters.
But in all seriousness, you've been on a couple times before, Jason, but if folks haven't heard those, I want to give a quick intro into who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Jason Lengstorf. I have been working in engineering for over 20 years now, and recently, over the last few years, I've been moving into making reality TV for devs. I'm not 100% sure what I do anymore, but I'm having a lot of fun.
You have found a niche, and I am enjoying that. It's like really cool, and you're like focused on more of like the show itself, and then like throwing in zingers there using like different technologies and stuff, and kind of stepping out of what we see all over the place, people arguing about React or not React or whatever else, and you're like, fuck it, let's use PHP. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the experience that we all have is that we get to have these moments of watching other people do something that they're good at. And I think we're all curious about how other people work. We're curious what tips we could pick up by watching somebody who's really experienced. But we don't have access to sit down next to somebody who is really experienced in PHP or .NET or Java or whatever and look over their shoulder. So getting a chance to sort of get a glimpse in through the window of how somebody like that works. And I think it's, there's a lot of fun in that. And then also creating something that is small and playful so that it's not high stakes. It doesn't feel like if you get it wrong, your career is over. You can just sort of enjoy yourself and be part of a community and learn something new without it feeling like it's, going to have a huge negative impact if you get it wrong. Like there's no way to get it wrong, right? We're just playing around.
Yeah, exactly. Like a hackathon with low stakes and high fun. I think that's really neat about it.
And that's sort of my whole plan is just to keep doing more like this. I'm working on a trivia show right now that's going to have similar kinds of vibes. It's going to be playful. It's going to be silly. And this one we are going to have prizes and winners for, but it's more in the just so that there's a purpose for the show to exist, not because there's anything big at stake.
Right. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Speaking of getting things wrong, there is something I feel we've gotten a bit wrong with our whiskey today. We're almost at Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, whatever they call it day, but we have St. Patrick's Day whiskey.
Part of this is my fault because I have been itching to try this one. And we did have it at the beginning of the year and somehow just like completely missed using it for St. Patrick's Day. I think we did like an Irish whiskey or something instead.
Yeah. I think we invited someone for St. Patrick's Day who couldn't make it, and then we just never drank it. But I forget, honestly.
Yeah. We can call that person. We don't want to reveal who they are, but we'll just call them Jason for shits and giggles. No, it wasn't Jason. I'm just kidding.
No,
I clearly don't
to him
remember.
recently.
Yeah. So today we're having the Kentucky Owl St. Patrick's Edition. It is 100 proofs, not age stated, but it's a blend of various 4 to 11-year-old bourbons, which means there'll be quite a diverse selection of mixed mash bills in that as well. And alas, away we go. I don't think I've tried any Kentucky Owl quite yet. Yeah.
I think we had it at that... Was it Japanese or just a steakhouse or place we went out when I came out?
Roca Accor.
When we sat at the bar. Yeah.
Was it that one?
We had some there because I saw it up on the shelf.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I'm a big liar, as proven often. Yeah, Roca Core, which is delicious. They have multiple locations, but it is one of my favorite places in the Phoenix area. So,
Smells like cherries to me.
Damn it. I hate when you do that before I smell it. I'm not quite getting that. It's a little waxy smelling to me. I have kind of a cold, if you can't tell in my voice anyway, though, so that could be affecting everything. Ooh, actually, but it tastes a little herby. Smell like cherry Kool-Aid. I think it's more like that. That's what I'm getting, more of an artificial cherry flavor.
Well, I don't like cherries, so I couldn't tell you what real cherries taste like.
It's almost got a leafy bitterness at first when I try that. Ooh, but it's pleasant, actually, as it sits. Goes down a little bit. What do you think, Jason?
I think it's good. This has some good, sweetness to it, which, I mean, I guess, sweetness in relation to whiskey. It's not, this is by no means sweet. There's this thing that I like when you get a whiskey. It has that initial burn on the front of your tongue. And then as you let it go toward the back of your tongue, it feels like it sort of spreads out and coats your tongue. And this has, to me, the same feel as if you were to get a drop of maple syrup and let it just kind of coat your whole tongue. And I feel like the aftertaste on this has that. It's not syrupy, but it has body. And I like that.
Yeah, like a thickness without being syrupy. Yeah, I like that. I think that definitely well describes kind of what I'm feeling, the salivation kind of occurring there. It has that. It does have a little bit of a sweet finish, has a little bit of a hug on the way down. It has some spiciness to it as well.
Well, I think that's what makes it nice, right? Like if this was 80 proof, I think the sweetness might be too much. But because it's 100 proof and it kind of starts out hot and then it mellows as it goes back, I think that makes it's balanced. It feels nice.
Yeah, I agree. Robbie, are you ready to kick off the ratings? I guess I should tell folks about the
how do I rate? Is it 1 to 420 or what?
If you really like, and why did you pick 420? Do you have?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know.
Highly technical rating system, 0 to 8 tentacles, 0 being I hate this and I'm going to throw it in the trash. I don't know why it was given to me for free. 4, middle of the road, okay, but wouldn't pursue it. 8, amazing, clear the shelves, and obviously everything in between. We don't mind halves, quarter stars, whatever you like. Take it away.
Tentacles, not stars.
I know, but 3 1/4 stars is evoking.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Anyway.
Oh, I'm going first?
Oh, no.
You don't have to.
No. Robbie can go first if you want.
I'll go first.
Okay. You're ready.
I would give this.
Dramatic pause.
I would give this a 6.5. This is very good. I would happily reach for it. There are things that I like better, but nothing about this is making me not want to drink it.
Yeah, that's similar to how I would describe it. I'm usually a spicier type of thing fan. This is pretty sweet for me. But in terms of bourbons, this is maybe my second or third favorite I've had. So I'd say a 7. It's pretty good.
Yeah, okay. So on that, I do think it's tasty. I do think it's kind of pricey for what it is. I believe it was, I think
it's over $100 for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely over $100.
Oh, geez.
The Kentucky Owl brand is all over $100 though. So it's an expensive
for real
brand.
Yeah. That's all of their stuff.
I mean, thank you for sending me a $100 bottle of whiskey. Knowing that it's that expensive, I actually think I would downgrade it to a 6.
Yeah.
It is, I wouldn't say it's, if this was a $60 bottle of whiskey, very strong. But compared to other $100 bottles I've had, I'd say this is pretty weak.
Yeah. See, and that is why I like to consider price in
I didn't
my
even
rating.
consider price.
I want to I want to be a bit wowed at certain price points. Trying new things in particular, you take a big risk there, and for over $100, am I blown away? Guys, this is amazing. I need to share this. I definitely will share this with friends. I do think it's tasty. I was kind of feeling 5.5, based on its price alone, just because I feel like I can get something as tasty for $60, sort of as you say. I'll swing around to a Old Forester 1920, something like that. That's $60, and I think that kills this. That said, it's good. If you have an opportunity, sure, try it out. I wouldn't overly pursue it. So yeah, I'm gonna go 5.5. just because that's what I was feeling. Yeah, well, that is still better than average. It is tasty. The price kind of tells me like I would probably go another direction to have regularly, though. Yeah,
that's fair.
Nothing wrong with that.
So we did take off some of our normal starting hot takes because I believe we already did those with you. Because I think we discussed this last time if we had done them before. And we were like, yeah, I looked up Tailwind in the transcript and couldn't find it. So I don't think we did them before. So then we did them the last time. I didn't look this time, but I'm pretty sure. So we're going to skip those. But we have some others that we have since added. So very important. Let or const.
Whatever you want. Like, I'm going to be completely honest. Like, I find that whole argument to be comical because it, like, truly could not matter less. Like, I honestly, I can't think of something I care about less.
Yeah. It's like saying pick your favorite color. And then they're like, oh, fuck you, blue is terrible. You know?
Yeah,
like,
it's sure there are maybe some reasons to use one or the other. And like personally, I like to use it as a signal where I set const if I'm not planning on changing it, and I set let if I'm planning on changing it. That to me is a good heuristic. If I'm working on a team, that's the way that I would think about it. But I have zero opinion about how other people like to use it. It's like how somebody styles their hair. Like, it's not my hair. Do whatever you want.
yeah, like the preference there is kind of that alone. I mean, does your code build and end up with the correct business objective or outputs? Okay, great. That's what matters. Well, then I'm really going to take it up a notch for you. This next one, sidebar on the left or right in VS Code?
This one actually is objectively correct. It's on the right.
Oh,
wow.
Okay.
Unless you're lazy.
If you are working in VS Code, if you don't toggle your sidebar, do whatever you want. But I feel like most of us toggle our sidebar because if we're working on a laptop, you don't have as much screen real estate, so you hide the sidebar. If you put it on the left, every time you toggle, everything on the screen moves. If you put it on the right, nothing moves. So objectively, a sidebar on the right is better.
But what does it say about me that I agree with you and I still don't do it?
Yeah, same.
I totally agree with
I
you.
see the appeal. I'm just never going to move it over there.
Yeah,
I mean, I would say, like, I know that I'm supposed to go to the gym 3 days a week and I don't do it. It's we can know that something is right and still be wrong.
That's very
Right.
good point. Yeah.
100% totally correct. Agree with that.
Oh, God. Okay. When you think about nested ternaries,
Avoid them if you can. Like, I find that the level of cognitive overhead to unwind one of those is not worth the 3 saved lines.
Yeah. I like if statements.
Like, there may be a couple cases where it might make sense, but generally speaking, if I find myself nesting anything, I'm looking at it like, why did I just do this? Like, am I doing this because I'm having fun writing clever code, or am I doing this because it's actually useful? And generally speaking, when you get into weird nesting, it's because it's fun to write clever code and not, it's like actively making it harder to read that code.
That's how you know you're a senior engineer, is like you're not basically like doing code masturbation and showing people how clever you are. You're past that phase. There you go.
It's also one of those things where it's sort of like when you, this is going to be an accidental hot take, but it's like when you see somebody who they've just like gotten their first job and they're trying to show everybody how cool they are now that they've got their own money to spend, and they do stuff that's like so obviously not useful or like in bad taste because they haven't quite, they don't know the tools well enough to make good decisions, so they're just kind of trying anything because they're like, oh, that's expensive, let me buy that. So it's and then like later as they've matured, you see the taste sort of chills out, and you can see that they now have an actual point of view and they've got some experience, and so the things they buy have some reasoning behind them. I think that code is a lot of the same thing. Like when you're new to something, a new idea is fun and you try to use it for everything, and then you realize as you maintain that stuff that a lot of those new ideas have very specific use cases where they make your life easier, and a whole lot of ways they can make your life worse. And so you start to develop taste and a sense of restraint to like do the thing that solves the problem, not do the thing that's like the most exciting thing you learned in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take. Instead of cursor or pair AI, which is more of a joke because the fork and all that fun stuff, how about cursor or Copilot in VS Code?
Practically neither. I don't use either one. I have seen Cursor in action. I've seen Copilot in action. I think I like the way that Cursor has approached it with the the sort of chat window and then showing you a diff. I think to me, that's like the right way to solve this problem. I have not seen $50 a month or whatever it is worth of value out of that to find it for me to make the switch. I also cannot stand the tab to autocomplete stuff.
Yeah.
Like in my VS Code, there are 6 extensions that compete over tab to autocomplete, and they're just not. So I steadily turn those things off. And because really what I want to autocomplete is like, I'm happy to have a command to say, all right, what should happen next? But the sort of like flashing of other people's opinions in front of my eyes as I'm trying to think has never really made me feel like I'm being more productive. It feels like I'm fighting my tools. And so both Copilot and Cursor do that, where they sort of like throw what their idea is at you before you get a chance to think. And so for that reason, I don't use either one.
Interesting. Are you using any of those kinds of tools, Robbie?
No. I haven't really even tried them. One, because I can't. So like at Amazon, I'd have to use Amazon Q, and like, but like Cursor seems like a pretty popular one. It seems like it's done something different and correct, because like pretty much everyone tried Copilot and it was kind of like, it's there. Sometimes it works, but like it just feels different with Cursor. Like the consensus online is everyone seems to think it's better. All that being said though, like I feel like there's not enough things I'm doing that like AI could help that much with, like especially CSS-y things. Like I've tried a bunch of times to get like ChatGPT or anything to help me with CSS, and it's like, I got you, here's a solution. And then it's like, hey, that doesn't work. And it's like, okay, well, how about this one? This one definitely works. And no, that one doesn't work either.
I think a lot of the challenge of those tools is, we got to keep in mind that AI, the LLMs that we're using in stuff like ChatGPT and Cursor and Copilot, they're prediction machines based on the body of work that's out there. And so by necessity, most of what they're using is stuff that's outdated in the coding terms, right? So they're using best practices from whenever the data set was assembled. And CSS is in a phase right now where it's moving weirdly fast. Like there's so much cool stuff coming into CSS over the last few years. That stuff isn't in production code bases. That stuff isn't being heavily used, so it's not going to be part of the auto predict that comes from the LLM. So we're going to get, like I had it try to generate some CSS for me, and it was still doing like float left kind of stuff. And that's fine. Like it all still works, but it's not recommending the state of the art stuff. And I've seen the same thing with JavaScript, where it recommends stuff that is a few years or many years in a lot of cases behind the way that I would have written something, and it doesn't take advantage of new APIs and new features that are built into browsers now because they just hit baseline like within the last year or so, right? So they're just not in the data set yet, and so it's unlikely that it'll recommend that because it's not really present. So I think if you're working in like a legacy code base, one of the things that I think is really interesting that I'm seeing more and more of is that I think Cursor, it's either Cursor or like Super Maven, one of them, it uses your code base and your recent commits as its primary source of data. It's like trying to match code styles because it's using your own code to kind of predict what it should do. And that tends to be a lot better than, here's everything we found on GitHub, and we just made some wild guesses based on what we've seen literally everybody do across all of time on GitHub. But it's still very much like it can only do what it's seen done, and it uses like consensus. So it's not going to use like cutting edge stuff because it hasn't seen enough of it.
Yeah, it's not being creative. I mean, that makes sense.
Which is maybe good. Maybe we will never be 100% out of work because it can't keep up with things as they change until they put out something that can keep up.
And I think like we misunderstand what generative AI means. Like generative doesn't mean creative. Generative means it is a very good prediction machine. It's a very good pattern matcher. It doesn't create new patterns. So like AI won't have new ideas. It's not going to replace creativity. It's another way of getting ideas onto a page, but we still have to generate those ideas.
Yeah, that's fair. Rails or Laravel?
Whatever you prefer. I haven't used either of them enough to have a strong opinion. just recently I did an episode of the Web Dev Challenge, and Josh Siri was on, and I saw how fast he was able to get something that looked good out of Laravel. That was super impressive. But I also know that Rails is powering a non-trivial number of like the most useful websites on the internet. So it's very hard to count either one of them out. Like they're both killer frameworks. I think it's just a matter of which language you know how to use, because I know PHP better than Rails, so I would probably go Laravel, but that's only because of my own history, not because of like any objective comparison.
Yeah. It definitely feels like those frameworks are on like a mission to show how like full stack frameworks help you get from like zero to deployed in a very short period of time, you know?
Well, and I think too, like, depending on what corner of the internet you hang out in, like if you're in indie hacker Twitter, Laravel and Rails and that stuff that may be there for you, or more likely they're definitely not, because you are trying to do something that's sort of off the beaten path. You're trying to come up with a new idea. You're doing whatever. And so we tend to value the sort of artisanal code. I think a lot of JavaScript Twitter is really into this idea of making stuff that's, you know, handcrafted and brand new. And so we look at things at like Laravel, or looking back further, like Bootstrap and Material Design. We look at them as being kind of stodgy. But if you're coming from a enterprise standpoint where you just need something to work, Rails is kind of undefeated. Like Laravel's kind of undefeated. They just you just get to do the thing, and it just functions, and you're done. You don't have to invent anything, right? So you got to remember what the purpose of different tools is. And if you're out there doing code because you're a code artist and you want to do code art, like of course you're not going to use a heavy framework, because it takes all your decisions away and you don't get to play and create. But if your job is to work on a product that is not your product, and you know you want to be done by 5 so that you can go hang out with your friends and family, Laravel and Rails are going to get you way further, way faster, and you know maybe you'll actually have some free time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big problems that we have, is that everyone loves having fun engineering stuff, but that stuff was solved a long time ago. Like, just use the solved solution. That's always been my thing, is like, just focus on your specific business logic, and then the rest should just be like auto-generated, basically.
Yeah, but
like,
you
don't
need to sign up for all of these services in order to make your app work.
Not necessarily. I think that's sort of the promise of Rails and Laravel, is that it's also baked in that you don't need any of the third-party SaaS.
It's a reminder that, remember when you didn't have to sign up for 6 SaaS services, and even if they have a self-hosted version, most times that's a farce. I mean, like, I like Supabase, but like, when am I going to self-host it? You know, like, probably never.
And I think, you know, the trade-off to that, of course, is like, I haven't had to look at a PHP MyAdmin UI in 15 years.
Yeah.
Right? And that's because we moved to SaaS solutions. And so we, you know, the complexity doesn't go away, it just moves.
Yeah.
And when you self-host Laravel or Rails or WordPress or any of those, you're the admin on that server. And if you're using Hetzner or you're using DigitalOcean or any of those, like, you're SSHing into boxes, you're setting up firewalls, you're managing Nginx, and that none of that stuff is particularly hard. But in comparison to setting up a Netlify site or deploying a pre-configured container on Fly, now the complexity is that you got to know how those tools bill so that you don't get yourself into trouble.
Right, exactly.
But you're not thinking about Nginx or PHP MyAdmin or how to, you know, set up firewalls or manage scale or hook together all the different AWS services that make your site resilient to DDoS without charging you $1 million for idle machines. Like, all that stuff the complexity is always there. Just it sort of shifts around based on which choices you make in your stack.
Yeah, and how you obfuscate that and whatever else.
Yeah, I do think if you've heard any of the podcasts DHH has been on recently, I think his points around, yes. His points around like your specific choice on whether you want to use a SaaS provider or like self-host or whatever is like, you know, up to you, but you shouldn't be scared of one or the other. You should know, like, he's like, his example was like, you know, if you have a 5-year-old code base and you want to just npm install stuff and run it, it's probably not going to work. You know, the complexity involved in just getting a JavaScript project to run is more than like SSHing to a box, opening a port, and serving a website. Like, so, and I think he's right on that. Like, I think you should at least experiment with it, whether you go one way or the other. Like, having that knowledge is helpful.
I mean, I've never been sad about learning something. Like, I say that a lot. Like, I
Wait,
don't
you learn things?
Well, that's the whole thing, right? Is if you're just continually gaining new knowledge, you're continually trying out something new, you're building a way to actually reason about trade-offs instead of repeating talking points that you heard somewhere else. That gives you agency, right? And so instead of saying, I haven't tried that because I heard it was hard and scary, you're saying, I don't do that because when I did it, these are the things that I spent all my time on, and I would rather spend my time on XYZ. And so I made the trade-off to, pay more to a platform or to self-host because I didn't want to pay more to a platform, whatever it is. Having that knowledge, having tried it in a handful of different ways, it just makes you stronger as a dev and makes it so that you can, reason about things from a point of knowledge as opposed to a point of sound bites.
Yeah, speaking of learning things, what are some of the coolest things you've learned recently on Learn with Jason? What are some of your favorites?
Good question. I just learned, I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna pull up my my site because it's been a busy little while here.
Yeah.
So I just learned about Vinxi. And so Vinxi is a project that it sits on top of Vite and Nitro. And so Vite is basically present in every modern framework except Next.js. Nitro is beginning to be very prominent. It's how a lot of modern frameworks make their deployments work across different platforms. And Vinxi is like an extra abstraction on top of that to allow frameworks to be built. So you can do things like define file-based routing. You can define how different things get processed or parsed or how data gets passed around. So you can build your own meta framework and, feel good about that, right? It's extremely cool stuff. It's what's behind Solid Start, TanStack Start. I think a couple others are using it. And that is, I think, very exciting. I also learned about Waku. And so Waku is interesting
Spell that
because
for me.
Waku. It is a React framework that is specifically built. It's built by Daishi Kato. And what Daishi did is he started from the point of view of I want to kind of almost like a reference implementation of React server components that isn't entirely in the Vercel ecosystem. Waku is a way to build and ship React server components in a framework-like way, and then from there, it's been evolving into a more full-fledged framework so that you can do all the things that you would do with Next or any of the others. I think that one's interesting because it's much more focused on like the simplicity of how things can function, and you can look at it and actually get a sense of how is React managing React server components, where the Next.js code base is kind of inscrutable, right? So when you look at that as like how would you do React server components, it sort of like disappears into private Vercel stuff that you can't see or really understand. And so Waku gives you a little more visibility into how that works and how you could implement it on your own. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, I'm a big Astro fan. I love Astro. So I got to see the Astro 5 beta on the show. That was amazing.
This just in, Whiskey.fund is now open for all your merch needs.
That's right, Robbie. We're hearing reports of hats, sweaters, and t-shirts, as well as a link to join our Discord server.
What's a Discord server?
Just read the prompter, man.
Hit subscribe, leave us a review on your favorite podcast app, and tell your friends about our broadcast.
It really does help us reach more people and keeps the show growing.
All right, back to your regularly scheduled programming.
RIP Astro Studio.
So one of the bummers about open source in general is that monetizing it is really hard. And so a few companies have found really good approaches to doing this. Like I would say NX is a great example. They have a good monorepo tool. It works everywhere. That's all MIT licensed. You can do whatever you want. And also they have NX Cloud, where if you plug your NX monorepo into NX Cloud, it adds extra features for CI/CD that like caches builds and does better diffing and stuff that like enterprise companies really care about because it saves them build minutes and it allows them to have finer grained control over how things are working inside of their monorepos across large teams. People will pay for that. And it's hosted. It doesn't really make sense to try to host it yourself. It's not the sort of thing that you would use unless you're a big company. So they found a good model where the NX Cloud is a clearly separated piece of technology that is fully dependent on the open source, and therefore building the open source is critical to the success of the commercial product. The majority of products, though, are kind of, like Next.js is, I think, probably my saddest example of how this goes wrong, where you've got something that is open source and people like it, but because all of the financial incentive is to push people to a cloud, the framework is sort of intentionally made hard to use elsewhere. They intentionally don't add things that would make it easier to post somewhere else. They intentionally don't expose some of the inner workings that would make some of their more advanced features work, because they're trying to move everybody toward Vercel. And that's not necessarily wrong, but it shows that the incentives are broken. And so I was really excited when I saw Astro Studio, because Astro Studio was, okay, well, Astro is going to be open source, and it still is. There's no change there. But then there was going to be this sort of like database add-on. We've got a database. We will host it for you. We're going to give you the ability to manage and do whatever you want with data. And you'll pay us for that, because a managed database is, that's a pretty clear path for somebody to pay for. So it sucks that it didn't catch on. And we could talk all day about why it didn't catch on, but the sunsetting of Astro Studio specifically means that revenue path for Astro is closed. And so how do they monetize? Like, what happens now, right? And the last thing I want to see is Astro Cloud, where they start making Astro shittier unless you host it on Astro Cloud. Because like that's what killed Gatsby. I think that's actively strangling Next.js right now. Like there's a lot of pushback on that.
Well, I think part of it, though, is that they refute exactly what you say, too, though. What you're saying there is that in order to appropriately monetize the framework, the best place to use Next is within Vercel. I do think they add complexity and magic there.
Oh, yeah.
I agree with you. I think that. But on the internet, they absolutely refute all of that. That they lean in hard to saying
Dax
that's not
like,
what we're doing.
This is hard, and they're like,
yeah,
no,
they
it's
argue.
Not.
Yeah, that's another nerd fight,
I think
by the way.
You can look at what people say and you can look at what people do.
Exactly.
And if you look at what frameworks that are actually open do, they do things like shift to Vite and Nitro so that they're fully open and fully deployable everywhere. And if you look at one that wants to appear open, they keep everything black boxed and they escape their own open source internals to go to special undocumented endpoints internally so that they can use their own infrastructure for special features that nobody else can use. There are ways to do this that are open, and there are ways to do it that are clearly not anti-competitive, well, kind of anti-competitive, right? And like Next.js wants to suck on other platforms because that's how they build it. If they wanted it to be good on other platforms, they would do things like add an adapter API for other servers. They would do things like document the endpoints that Vercel uses to make it good on Vercel. And the fact that they don't do that, that's an action that shows they're not interested in actually being compatible. They want everybody to be forced to use Vercel for the best features. They can say whatever they want. The actions are very clear in what their intentions are.
There wouldn't be an open Next project if what they said was true, essentially.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because I actually like Vercel, and I used to like Next.js until they like did all this shit. And
well,
I mean, I guess they've always done that.
I fucking
but
hate
like,
the app router. I hate app router.
Yeah. Why does everything have to change? This is my stance on every framework, and this is maybe stupid because whatever, I'm old and I don't want to change. Why don't we make everything the same? Why don't we make everything the same and just transpile it? Like if you want to change the way that shit works, my API should be the same. And you just transpile it to whatever you want behind the scenes. I don't want to have to change the way I do it. Like,
Robbie, I have bad news for how things are working. That's exactly what's happening. It's all just JavaScript, my dude.
Right? Like all of this sugar on top and preferential syntax and everything that comes down the pipe that you have not enjoyed does end up just vanilla JavaScript in the end, right?
I mean, I love Astro because it is mostly what you see is what you get. There's not a bunch of bullshit. It's just writing normal HTML, and like, you know, even if you write React stuff, like a lot of it can go away. And I mean, you can use any framework. Like Astro's got it all right. I think it's like back to the correct way to write web apps, where it's like static by default,
little bit of islands as you need it. Like, we don't need everything to be dynamic. We don't need like React to power every single piece of your app. It's like, it can be HTML. That's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, the major challenge too is like the march of progress is there. And some of it is because there are problems, and some of it is because we need something to sell because we all took millions of dollars in investment and have to have something to return on, right? The thing that I worry about is that, like, what Astro has done is they looked at the platform and they said, well, the platform does almost everything that we need, so let's just add the pieces that it doesn't have. And as the platform has added more features, they've been removing features, right? And this is like, I always say jQuery is my favorite project because jQuery did it exactly right. They saw gaps, they standardized JavaScript across browsers, and as browsers saw those standards get adopted, they took the best parts of jQuery in. And jQuery still exists, but it very much bowed out and said, hey, the things that we were here for, you don't need us as much for that, right? And they allowed the project to sort of fade into, like, of course you can still use it. Of course it's still maintained, but it's no longer like marketed. You don't say like, oh yeah, you should be using jQuery, because the selector engine got built into the platform now. A lot of the things that jQuery was really good at are built into the platform now. So reaching for jQuery is because your project is already built on jQuery, or that's the only way you know how to do JavaScript, which are both completely valid reasons, but it's no longer like the starting point. Like, I feel like in its heyday, you learned jQuery because it was really the only viable path to writing JavaScript on the web if you had to go cross-browser anyway.
Yeah, that was it.
And I think that some frameworks are adopting that mindset. I think that, you know, this was the approach of Babel, and I loved it because Babel was like, okay, we're going to make the specs work ahead of time and then use that feedback to inform how the specs evolve. And when the spec catches on, the Babel plugins disappear. And so Babel is a disappearing framework. Astro, I think, has taken a similar approach where they're a disappearing framework. When you ship an Astro site, if you delete the meta tag that says it's generated by Astro, there's no indication that you're using Astro until you activate an Astro feature like an island or the server components or something like that. To me, that's the right way to approach it. Like you said, Robbie, they're going back to the right defaults where what a user wants is to see something on the internet. They don't want to wait for it to hydrate. They don't want to load all the data twice or all these things that we tend to do because maybe it'll make the experience a little bit better. A lot of times I'm trying to go to a restaurant's website so I can figure out what their address and hours are, and then I'm going to close that website. I don't need that to be a React site. Like, it just doesn't, it doesn't do any benefit for me. Like, I want it to be the smallest, tiniest thing ever so that when I'm on shitty cell phone 3G in the tunnel, I can still load the website because it's only 15 kilobytes, right? To me, that's like, and I think we've lost sight of that because we want everything to be so flashy. So it's just, you know, it's just one of those things that I hope we're not adding features because making things more complex allows us to charge for them. I hope we're adding features because they actually solve a problem.
Yeah. There's two triggers from you there, but I'll let Robbie go first.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do think we're going back to that, like with everyone loving PHP and Ruby and, you know, all the old stuff again and realizing how good it actually has always been. We're doing that with JavaScript now too. We're like, wait, all right, you're right. We did too much. Let's take a step back. Let's make it a little easier. Let's only do the stuff you really need. And I think we'll get to that point of, like, you know, Astro's kind of got it right now. And I think everything else will remove features, like you said, until they get to that point where it's like less complex and less like craziness. We don't need all those like things that they were all patches for like stuff that couldn't be done in the web, you know, as it was coming out. But like now you can do most of the things. So
yeah, and compute has become cheaper. Like that's a thing, is we were deferring compute to the client because that helped things be faster and cheaper. And now server compute, you know, within your own cloud or data center or whatever, all of that has become cheaper. So now we can do more on the server again. So we come back to server tools that were kind of doing everything for us and look at that again. I think that's like one aspect of it. So yeah, a couple of things there. It's funny, like we were talking about different libraries going to the path of like working themselves into elimination over time. And I think that's the ideology behind HTMX. I don't know if you have any like experience or feelings about HTMX, but HTMX like looks at hypermedia controls, which only apply to an anchor or a form element. It's basically islands. architecture simplified, which is like we can apply hypermedia controls to more things in order to like fetch true REST, which would be returned HTML in a state, and then replace as needed, right? And then pushing that into a spec. There you go. It's the same thing. And then as the spec would catch up to that, you would no longer need HTMX because, you know, it's eventually replaced over time. I don't know if you have any like experience with HTMX or opinions about that.
I have exactly one episode of Learn with Jason's worth of experience on HTMX. So I think it's cool. I don't use it, but not for any real reason other than it's not the tool I chose.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's nothing wrong with that or using it or not using it. It is like, but if you do choose to go down that path and think about it, then, you know, so I think that's like one thing. And then the other thing is like, not everything is a web app. I think we've started to like think about that again is, oh yeah, I learned React in a boot camp or I just like it and I want to apply that tool everywhere. And it doesn't necessarily apply as like regress back to websites where websites make sense. You don't always need a CMS. Yeah. Remember we used to have those conversations and sort of just like push HTML up and Astro does that really well.
Yeah, which is the beauty of Astro. Like if you want to use React syntax, but you want to say this is static, and it realizes like, hey, this doesn't need any React. It'll just be HTML. Like, because we love the convenience of these frameworks and the tooling around them that's like come out. And we're never going to go back from that like developer experience perspective. But what you're shipping should go back to like the fundamentals. I should get the nice experience as a developer, but then you should get the nice experience having a static website because I didn't realize these like 50 React components could just be HTML. So like it should just ship that.
And there we go. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We have a little time for whatnot. I think we should take advantage of that.
All right. So Jason, if you send me an email, should I read all of it?
Yes.
I mean, it is a yes or no question.
It seemed like you had opinions around this. You had a tweet around like what you should do if you send me an email.
Well, it depends on what we're doing, right? Like if I'm cold outreach to you, do whatever you want, right? But if we've agreed that we're going to do something and I send an email and there are next steps in the email, rarely, not often, somebody will respond to me and it's very clear that they read the first sentence and then reply to that first sentence. And then they'll ask something like, what are next steps? To which I have to like go copy paste the next steps out of the email into the response. And that makes me feel like I'm being passive aggressive. So it sort of like taints the whole conversation where now it's, you know, I'm suddenly going per my last email and it just makes things complicated, right? And so I think that one of the big challenges of doing business, right, is that we're all so busy. And if we're trying to multitask, we miss details, we miss something that's going on. And you know, I'm looking now at my inbox and I'm doing the same thing. I've got emails that have been sitting for days that I really need to respond to, but I haven't had time to like sit down and look at them. And if I just opened them and ripped off a response, I'd probably miss context, right? And so I don't know that not responding to an email is better than partially responding to an email. We can debate that. But like legitimately, I think that like it is one of those things that when I work with somebody who very clearly, they're just on top of things. Like if you ask for something, you know it's going to get done. You know they read it. Like if you ask them to fill out some details and you need information so that you can take next steps, and they give you all of that information on the first try with no follow-ups. If they need to book a trip, they book the trip. If they need to set something up for you, it just gets done. You don't have to ask. Those sorts of things just make me feel more confident in the partnership and make me more excited to work with a company or a person again. Whereas if I feel like I'm constantly chasing somebody or trying to get somebody to explain what they meant because I got half an answer that wasn't clearly related to what was asked in the email before, then it just kind of makes me like, I don't know, that was a lot of work last time. Like maybe this isn't a project I want to take on. There is a ton of leverage in how good you make it feel to work with you. And a lot of that is not about how good you are at the job. It's about how good you are at managing the job. It's how you set expectations, how thorough you are with the things that you get asked for, how quickly you deliver. And, I get this right sometimes and I get this wrong sometimes, and I can definitely see the results. Like the people that I am on top of it with, they come back and they want to work with me over and over again. And if I get buried and I'm slow, I can feel the reluctance in the folks that I'm talking to where they're kind of like, you're kind of a pain in the ass. I don't really want to keep doing this. Email is one of those things. It's terrible, and there's too much of it. It's a hydra. Like every time you respond to an email, it spawns 2 more. But it's so critical to the way that we work, and being good at it is, I think, kind of an unsung skill. If you're very good at email, it's going to get you further than being in a remote world. Like it'll get you further than a lot of things.
Yeah. Being good on camera, it won't get you as far as being good on email. I will say, as someone who sent you an email 2 days ago, you're drinking whiskey and being on fucking random podcasts doesn't bode well. I'm just saying. No, I'm just kidding.
It's true.
Sorry, Robbie.
Well, it's true.
I was just going to say, I think like we've spent all this time on AI and like it's going to replace coding. Fix fucking emails. Somebody. Like, I want an AI that I could actually trust to say, look, you got 490 emails today. You care about 5. Here's why you care about these 5. And like, this is what you should respond to. The rest is either spam or like, we're not sure. Maybe review these 10. Something that can like get that 100% right. I'll pay whatever you want, because I get like, I can't sit here for like a second without getting an email. Like, it's so fucking insane. I can never. So like, yeah, just fix that. Like, stop building other shit that we don't need. Let's build that.
I don't know what you did, Robbie, but you need to unsubscribe from some things.
Yeah, that's
I do. Every time I get it, I think like people, I have a conspiracy that when you unsubscribe from certain things, they go, that's a real email, and they sign you up for like 50 other things.
Yeah. That's true. I do think that is kind of, because when you get some random stuff, if you click anything at all, sometimes I feel like this just tells them it's a real email, and I don't like where this is going.
I also get like 100 calls and texts a day. I just ignore everything because
they want your vote. They want your vote, and here's
they're
the
like,
issue.
would you like $700,000? And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm not going to take it from a random text message. Like,
you were chosen by the Prince of Nairobi. Yeah.
No, they're all loan based, and I'm like, hey, where'd you get my info from? Can I get your home number so I can call you there?
That's an old Seinfeld thing. So here's another thing, fellas in tech. I saw you had some tweets around like your personal style and like adapting that to, moving forward and having kind of like a vision of what you want to look like. And I dig that. And don't judge me based on like right now, but although I do kind of have the Hawaiian shirt thing going on. Yeah. I'm at various times in my life, I'm like, I have those thoughts about like my personal style and how I want to be perceived and like evolving, as a man, aging and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was like worth bringing up and just talking about a little bit.
That's been a whole adventure, because I've gone through a handful of phases. Like when I was younger, I was in a band, and so fashion was very forefront, but it was band fashion. I had like the makeup and the dyed hair and the swoopy haircut.
I would love to see pictures of this. You should.
You can find them if you look around. But I got into tech, and I decided I was going to be a uniform guy, right? I watched a couple things where people talked about like how Steve Jobs wore the same thing every day, and there were a couple other folks. It was like same outfit every day, and I was like, okay, maybe this is, or like Barack Obama is another one, where Barack Obama wears the exact same suit every day of his presidency, and I was like, okay, maybe this is the right way to go. Like, keep it simple. So I bought a bunch of the same black t-shirt, bunch of the same pairs of jeans, and I just like wore the same outfit all the time. And then those started wearing out, and companies started, like, I got more visible as a DevRel, and so suddenly I was getting like boxes of swag. I didn't even know it was coming sometimes. Like sometimes they would get my address from somebody else, and I would just get a box of like t-shirts and hoodies and stuff like that. And so there was a solid couple of years there where I only wore free stuff. Everything that I wore was like a free t-shirt, a free hat, or whatever it was. And then I started getting more into this video stuff. And so as I've gotten into the video stuff, I started looking at what I looked like on camera versus what somebody like, and obviously, we all have our own opinions about how we look and what we wish we looked like. But even compared to somebody who I was like, what does Maddie Matheson dress like? There's this guy named Big Fits who is,
that guy's awesome.
He's great on Instagram. He's like Big Fits 1, I think.
Yeah, the Derek, the style guy on
menswear
Twitter
guy
has talked about him. Yes.
Yeah. So he posts his outfit every day on Instagram, And he's like a big, I think he and I are fairly similar build. And so I look at his outfits and I'm like, man, this guy actually looks like put together. He's not just wearing like the tech logo t-shirt with the tech logo hoodie and the tech logo hat. And I was like, maybe I should try harder, right? And then this was where I got radicalized. I watched The Birdcage.
Oh, okay. Haven't seen
And
that
I
in a
watched
while,
it, like
but-
there was a moment where I think it was Robin Williams, like would have been his birthday, like a little while back. And so somebody circulated these photos of his style in The Birdcage. And I was like, all right, let me watch this movie. So I watched that movie and I was like, I know how to dress like this. I could just dress better. And then I learned about eBay. And so a lot of things sort of all happened at the same time where I realized that I didn't need to have thousands of dollars to go and fully replace my wardrobe, which was a blocker because I was like, I didn't care enough, right? I'm not going to put myself in financial hardship to go and do all that.
Yeah, to chase trends or something.
Right, and I didn't want to go buy like trendy stuff because it always goes in and out. So then I was looking at the menswear guy on Twitter. I was looking at some of the, I started going down these rabbit holes of people who have been icons of style and how they've dressed. And I looked back and I noticed that there's actually like a lot of stuff that hasn't changed over the years. And if you can avoid the Kanye West style fashion, where it's very like Balenciaga, wearing trash bags and stuff like that, and you just look at what everybody's actually wearing, like in their interviews when they go on red carpets and stuff, it's like, wait, they all wear the same 15 pieces of clothing. So if I just get those staples, like I'm not going to age out of these, right? So like this, for example, this is a cable knit Irish wool sweater.
Yeah, you wear that the rest of your life.
This has been around since
Never
probably
goes
the
out of
60s or
style.
70s.
Yeah.
And these are always in style. And I got this on eBay for like $70. So instead of going to the designer store where the cable knit wool sweaters are going to be $500, right? I went on eBay, I found one that fit me, and I'm probably going to be able to go get 2-3 more before I even start to approach what the cost of one of these new would be. These are used Carhartt work jeans, right? And they fit great and they look great. They're old, kind of beat up, but like
That's
I got them
the
for
appeal
$35 on eBay.
Yeah.
And so
Do you like Poshmark? Because I've gotten some stuff on Poshmark too.
I haven't looked at Poshmark. That's maybe a good idea. But the same thing. Like I've got in the summer I was wearing a lot of linen, a lot of Hawaiian shirts, and I found like Rain Spooner is a Hawaiian company from the '60s, and those sell for $35. And so I got a bunch of really cool old vintage Hawaiian shirts for not that much money. I went and got some linen button downs, some linen pants, all like between $30 and $60 on eBay. And they're baggy, which is in style. They're really comfortable. It was like 95 degrees. It went over 100 degrees a few times in Portland, and I was able to walk around without sweating my ass off. Which like that's been a problem for me my whole life. I was wearing like a t-shirt and shorts, but it's a cotton t-shirt that doesn't breathe because it's cheap crap that I got for free at a conference, and I'm like fully sweating through it, right? And so I switched over to a linen button down and a tank top, thinking, yeah, I'm still going to be sweaty, but at least there's some airflow. And I wasn't sweating through my clothes anymore. And I was like, oh my God, we've forgotten so much about how to dress.
Yeah. We've gone with convenience. It's the same with everything.
Yes.
It's like we went away from records for CDs because they were smaller and you could put it in your car. Not because it was better. Like,
And
that's the
and
same
now we
with
don't
clothes.
own anything, right? Also,
Yeah.
So it's like everything I stream, I don't actually own. So I might have to, or if I change devices and I purchased it, it might be gone forever. I can't resell it.
I feel like I had so many things to say, but
I cut you
forget
off, and
all
I'm
of
so
them.
sorry about that. I've been trying to be better
fine.
about this in our dynamic. Is cutting Robbie off and
I know,
letting him
but
finish
it's-
his thoughts.
My brain
he's old.
doesn't
He's like
work
31,
most of the time,
32
so I'm
now,
just-
and so he forgets
Hey,
everything. And
What? How? I'm 33. I'll be 34 next month.
I barely give you 30 most of the time. It's like it's a hard pool for me. So, but anyway,
Yeah, I was talking to Caitlin yesterday about her dad was the age like we are now when we first started dating. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. Like, it seemed like he was an adult then, and I don't feel like an adult now.
I have a distinct memory of being 16, and there was this guy that he owned the store across the street, and he was 34 years old, which in retrospect, this guy was a badass. He had a really cool shop and it was, anyways. But I remember he would come over and he'd eat at the restaurant that I worked in, and we'd talk to him. And when he would leave, I remember distinctly turning to my friend who was 16 saying, he's pretty cool for an old guy. and now I'm almost 40. I don't know if anybody ever starts to feel old, but I am simultaneously I feel too old for a lot of things, and also I still feel way too young for all of this. I'm like, who's trusting me with any responsibility? I don't know anything. And also, I'm like, the youths. So.
Yeah, the youths.
I feel like it's such a conspiracy is not the right word, I guess, but it's like, growing up, you're like, adults have their shit together. They know what they're doing. Like your teachers in school, you're like, wow, they're an adult. They know everything. They're like so well studied and know everything. And then it's like, I think everyone's just kind of faking it all the time. Like
you just get
we're
better
doing
at
the best we
improv.
can.
Right? Like when we're kids, we're not very good at improv. So everything is an emergency. Everything is a crisis. And then you get older and you realize there's always an emergency, and you just kind of realize that it's fine. Like this emergency isn't going to end us. So you just learn how to improv, and it makes you appear to have your things together, but you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I don't feel like I've gotten any better at anything, like as my responsibilities have increased. And I still feel like the same as, I was when I was like 21-ish, give or take. But
maybe that's why stress rises as you get older, Like as a kid, I don't know. Even though I had like all kinds of fucked up things going around me, I feel like my stress levels
blissfully
were much
unaware,
lower.
though.
Yeah. It's a good segue into a two-wheeled touring device. Segways.
What?
Yeah, Segways.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
Oh, I thought you
I
had
make the
something.
bad
I was like,
dad
are we
joke
talking
'cause
about
I'm the old
motorcycles or something? I don't know what. Anyway.
Yeah, there's no Segway motorcycle.
But yeah, we are over time. So is there anything you want to plug or mention that we didn't get to before we end?
Just go watch the silly stuff I'm making, and hopefully you enjoy it and want to share it with your friends. The Learn with Jason YouTube is a good place to go, or learnwithjason.dev has good links to things. But yeah, just hang out, be a friend.
Do you want to play us out with some music, Chuck?
I'm not sure I'm in a place to beatbox totally. My voice
You
is all
don't have
fucked
to.
up.
We already have a. Okay.
No,
All right,
I don't know.
cutting
It's
you off
very
there.
bad.
We're done.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks for having me.
You've been watching Whiskey Web and Whatnot, recorded in front of a live studio audience.
What the fuck are you talking about, Chuck?
Enjoyed the show? Subscribe.
People don't pay attention to these, right?
Head to whiskey.fun for merch and to join our Discord server.
I'm serious. It's like 2% of people who actually click these links.
And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and tell your friends about the show.
All right, dude, I'm out of here.
Still got it.